how do we create a safe and secure environment for students to fail when AI makes it so easy to always be right?
Some of the early experience with AI simulations, they suggest that students are really willing to fail. AI has the potential to enhance our learning. It has the potential to inhibit our learning.
You speak also about future literacy, right? Does that mean learning to use the tools or learning how to live without them?
I use future literacy here in the sense of the 21st century skills framework that Trilling and Fidel has popularized, which basically says that there are sort of some skills that is commonly held to be necessary to function in today's society, in future society, in this century. And those skills, they include things like part of thinking about thinking, or I love the word metacognition, for me at least, is just sort of, remembering what sort of to accept and what to push back. This is where I may also have a concern. Are they ready? Are they ready for, metacognition? Are they ready for
I agree.
For being self-directed? It comes back then to sort of, the debate right now about, the term artificial intelligence. Is AI intelligent? One of the reasons that this is being debated is we don't really have a clear definition of what makes us humans intelligent. If we believe, Marilla, that our intelligence works in the way that sort of, based on your prior experience.
Hello to everyone. In our last episode with René Larsen, we explored the strategic discipline required to navigate modern markets. Well, if René Larsen gave us the map for the landscape, Just Pedersen is here today with us to give us the manual of the digital mindset by exploring how we use AI to augment our intelligence rather than failing into cognitive death. Hello, Just. Hello and welcome.
Oh, hello, Marilla. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about you, please.
Well, sure. So when I'm not appearing on your podcast, I'm an associate professor with the Business Academy of Copenhagen. I'm also one of the editors of the Danish niche media AI portal, which, as the name would suggest, covers all things AI. And yeah, that's, I think, is the very brief version of me. As most professors with the Business Academy, I used to work in business. So I've been a business consultant for some large consultancies like KPMG and Implement. I've worked as a business developer for some large companies like BP and Ørsted. But for the past decade or so, I've been looking into sort of how to teach e-commerce and other new exciting technologies to young people at the 2 bachelor's degrees that I coordinate. So that's me. Yeah.
Wow. Pretty interesting background, I would say.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You have moved from management consulting, as you just mentioned a second ago, to researching the deep mechanics of AI in education. What was that red flag that made you realize we needed to look closer at how AI affects our brains?
Yeah. So I mean, I think I've been teaching in the e-commerce space for the past decade, and e-commerce is actually sort of where we had some of the first pre-generative AIs, because we had the big AI, Google, and Google would like to find texts, and humans would like to have their homepage be found, and very early on, some programs they arose that if you had a product name like running shoes, well, a computer could make a text that would mention running shoes in the way that Google liked it. Yeah. So we had smaller machines, talking to the bigger machine, and so that our homepage would be found. But these tools was where I got some very early insight into what we now know as ChatGPT, as Google Gemini, and all those other great products. And I think sort of the red flag for me was when I saw that potentially within learning institutions, within the educational sector in Denmark, the premise is that we ask students to create works of knowledge. And we don't ask them to do that because, we like them to, slave and work, but because we recognize that the process of creating a work of knowledge requires you to develop an understanding. But all of a sudden, with AI, we get a very, very easy way to create a work of knowledge that, to the untrained eye will look, great and top professional, but there's actually been no development of understanding in that. And that's sort of what made me pay attention. And I think sort of, the point here is that I'm seeing a disconnect between output and understanding. It used to be very
Sure.
tightly connected, and it's not anymore.
Well, we were gonna talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Well, again, you speak also about future literacy, right? Does that mean learning to use the tools or learning how to live without them, actually?
Well, I mean, I use future literacy here in the sense of the 21st century skills framework that Trilling and Fidel has popularized, which basically says that there are sort of some skills that is commonly held to be necessary to function in today's society, in future society, in this century. And those skills, they include things like critical thinking, like creativity. They also include understanding IT. They also understand understanding AI. And so basically what the framework does, and I agree with this point, is that it says there's something about being creative, thinking critically, and there's also something about understanding the tools that we have there. So I think for me, future literacy is about developing both judgment, own personal judgment, but also to know how AI works, how IT products work. And I think those are two different areas that need to be trained separately, but I think they're equally important.
So, looking at your research, do you think we are currently in a honeymoon phase with AI, that it's blinding us to the long-term cognitive costs? I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sort of we're definitely right now in a phase right now where if you know a little about AI, you know relatively a lot compared to other people. So I think there's a lot of people.
What do you
who are
mean by
us-
that?
what I
Yes,
mean
I'm
is what I
curious.
mean is that there's a lot of people who are using AI, but they're not thinking about how they're using it. They're not understanding the tool.
Okay.
And I mean, AI is a great tool because it allows you to do that. It allows you, without having a deeper understanding of how it works, to sit down and use it. So it's very accessible, yeah. But that also means that it's being accessed by a lot of people who are using it in a potentially long-term destructive way.
Can you give us some examples as well, so for others to might
Yeah.
understand that how they use it is destructive in that sense? Thank you.
Well, I think sort of, if we come back to the red flag
Exactly.
in your first sentence, if I have a group of students and I ask them to write a report on the customer journey for a given product, and they ask the AI to do it, I will get a nice report. But what will the students have learned? If I give them a good grade, they'll learn, well, ChatGPT can write great reports, and that will be the sum of their learning. So this is fine if they think, if the students are thinking, I don't need to learn about customer journeys, stupid old professor, let's just give him something, I get my diploma, he gets his pay, everybody's happy. Yeah, I would not generalize it. I would not say that's the majority. I think it's a point that some students may have, but I think there's a lot of other students who don't have that point of view. And I think it depends, on what topic. But I think that's one of the things I think is fascinating about sort of learning in AI is that you're pushed much more into having to decide what learning you believe is relevant for that. But we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that later on. But I think sort of the bad usage of AI is if you use it way to create where you should be learning. And the strange thing about AI is you could also use it to learn. I mean, it's AI has the potential to be both a learning enhancer and a learning inhibitor, depending on how you use it. And that sort of comes back to sort of my point about that. I think there is something about AI literacy that is a very, very important part of future literacy.
You mentioned also that AI often skips the thinking phase. That's again because it is connected to what we have talked until this point, and moves straight to the apply phase. This is the tendency, kind of. What happens to a human mind that stops practicing the middle step?
I mean, the mind is a muscle, you know.
Exactly.
If we want bigger abs, you know, we go to the gym, we lift some weights. If we want a sharper mind, well, we train it. Not with weights, but with other exercises that are more suitable in that direction. But very basically, I think that's the risk here. You know, that people will get lazy, and there's a growing body of evidence within the literature that seems to confirm this hunch. That yes, people who, you know, move into using AI in an unreflective way, they simply become less proficient in thinking within the topic that they are using AI for.
Is it possible to be an expert in something if you have used AI to bypass the struggle of learning it?
Yeah. No, it's not. I mean, very, very clear, hard, absolute no. So expertise is something that's only achieved through wrestling with concepts, through making mistakes, revising judgments, and sort of gradually, well, you know, building up your own judgments and value calls around a topic. If you're using AI to perform and, you know, to create without, you know, your own thought process, your own learning, then that will not be a path to expertise. But it can simulate it. I mean, strangely enough, we also have some studies that point out that in the workplace, the performance increase from using AI is the highest with less experience beginning untrained labor. So, I mean, because they just prompt and then, you know, they take the answer and they put the answer on. But I think this is something that carries a lot of risk, you know, because what they're passing on, you know, is wrong. And you need somebody with experience to point that out. In terms of performance, you know, AI can allow you to perform a task in which you do not necessarily have expertise. Yeah, which is a weird way of using that word. But the usage of AI carries some risks, but, you know, I mean, the usage of building up expertise carries risks as well. But I think sort of, you know, you cannot, but just to give a very clear answer again, you cannot be an expert without having, you know, put in the hours. I think within basketball, you know, they say you have to make 1,000 shots a day if you want to play in the pro league. Yeah,
Absolutely.
not shoot.
So the practicality still is still available also in the case of AI. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Definitely, yeah.
By the way, since we are talking about this, Joost, I have another example and a question also at the same time. In a professional environment, that means while a person, let's take myself, if I'm an employee that works for a company, it doesn't matter the size of the company, small, medium, big, it doesn't matter. But either way, if I'm working for this company and I have the opportunity to use AI for that company, right? But I'm not an expert as such, okay? So I'm allowed to use AI during my schedule in that professional environment. And I know that there are some legislations, at least in EU, that actually you have to give to your employees a specific training in regards in order for those employees to use AI, also because they have to protect the data of that company, the privacy, and so many other elements that they have to be included in this topic. So what would you say in regards to this particular example?
Well, I mean, I would say that it's true that the EU AI Act mandates AI training.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a fairly new piece of legislation. And so I think what's not sort of been decided is how specific that training should be,
Yeah,
what it
I
should cover.
heard about that. Yeah, exactly. That's
Um,
why I'm asking to you as well.
yeah. And I mean, the answer is it's a good question. I mean, in GDPR, which was, the latest greatest branding campaign from the EU. There's now sort of a fairly good understanding of what is that, and what triggers fines, what triggers warnings,
Mm-hmm.
and how should we deal with that. And I think sort of, but I mean, if let's think of sort of the process that went through. Right now, I think there's going to be a honeymoon phase where regulators, they're going to be focusing on advising on developing practices, um,
Okay.
for for example, sort of what level of training would be required. And over the coming years, we'll see some sort of framework emerge. I mean, one of the metaphors I like to use for AI is, if we imagine, that we had cars, but we had no regulation on driving. There was nothing called a
Mm-hmm.
driver's license.
Definitely.
That is the state of AI right now. It's a powerful technology. It's very
Mm-hmm.
potentially useful. It can lead to accidents, but we don't have sort of a practice around it. No, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. But it's a good question.
You use the term cognitive debt, just like financial debt, right?
Yeah.
How do we eventually have to pay back the thinking we have outsourced to machines?
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, I'm using this from again. This is a term that's being thrown around out there in the literature. I mean, there's a researcher called Kasimna who I've stolen it from and who I like to quote on this topic. But very basically, I mean, if you are given a task by your employer
Mm-hmm.
and you're using AI to perform that, great. But at a certain point, if you have to, let's say your boss asks you for a presentation,
Mm-hmm.
well, you can have AI, write up a presentation or a white paper, and you can send that off, and your boss can think, okay, that's great. Now, if your boss then asks you to come in and do that presentation,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you have to pay the cognitive debt.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you have to sort of, I mean, or you'll end up in the situation where you're standing there reading some words from a slide, not being exactly sure, what what they mean. Something that, of course, has never happened to any educator in Denmark. But that's the cognitive debt that we have to be mindful of. When we are using AI, we are not to create something. We're not learning, and I think I like to think of it as that's fine if our objective is not learning.
At this point, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not a researcher as such, but I'm something else. I do think that to a certain degree, you can still learn by using AI. So to a certain degree, you still learn if you use it in a healthy way, if you use it in a constructive way, if you know what are your limits, and if you know what are the limits of that AI tool, yes, because they do have limits. That's the whole point, as we as humans as well. So there are so many things and elements, important elements that has to be considered in regards to this topic, because I think that people should know or remember at least that this is really truly a powerful tool, as you just mentioned earlier. That's the whole point. But being so powerful can also harm us, but also can do good. So we still, there is that gap that a lot of people still nowadays, they don't reflect upon that, thinking that there is also a process in the middle. That means the process of learning also include that particular phase, right? So that's why I wanted to stop you for a second, because it can be actually a tool to learn, but it depends how you use it, the usage of that tool.
Definitely. One of the sort of terms that I found in the literature, which I think is interesting, is the expression a pedagogical prompt. And a pedagogical prompt is when you try to prompt the machine to help you learn.
Exactly.
And very basically, I mean, the premise for a pedagogical prompt would involve you writing something like, "Don't give me the whole answer straight away. Take me through the steps one by one. You know, ask me questions. Help me understand both sides of an argument before I proceed," and stuff like that. But sort of
Thank you
definitely, I
for
mean,
mentioning this. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, but I think sort of that AI has a huge potential in enhancing learning. Um,
I
and
agree.
again, I think, this comes back to one of the very first questions you asked, which is sort of, what is this future literacy? And I think part of it's simply understanding that AI can inhibit your learning. It can also enhance it. And
Yes, definitely.
these are sort of then the ways that you would do either of those two things.
But that's why I would like to kind of sometimes dive into this particular matters, because they are so very much important, and they are so powerful to just know them and know the difference between what harm us and what actually do good to us. In a world where AI can give us the answer in seconds, how do we protect the value of that process, since we were talking about that?
No, but, we simply refuse to confuse output with learning. Protecting the value of the process is simply recognizing that there is a process, yeah, and being conscious about it. And I think that's also something that I think we should go a little bit deeper into. Um, is this idea that AI forces us to be more conscious about how we do things. It's no longer just,
Totally.
let's,
Yes.
throw ourselves into it and do it, but you actually sort of need to reflect first. Wait a second, what is sort of the framework for this, and what are my goals here? And it requires us to be self-conscious
I agree.
in a higher degree.
Yeah. Your research mentioned that people feel less ownership over work created with LLM. So if we don't own our work, do we eventually lose our sense of professional identity? Could happen that.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, if we believe that there is no longer a connection between outputs and process, is somebody then a painter because they've made some paintings if they used AI? If I go into Udio, one of the music AIs, and creates a number of songs, am I now a musician? I would rather say that AI allows us to create output outside of our profession, of our expertise. It doesn't create expertise for us in that space. It doesn't make us an expert in that, but it allows us to go in and make something. So I think there's also something here about professional identity actually sort of becoming more narrow, more specialized.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If we can't recall or code our own essay, are we actually becoming less literate while appearing more productive?
Yes, I mean, this is the cognitive debt that you were asking about before, where we have a number of studies about students using AI to produce these essays. People read those essays, they think, "Oh, great essays.
Mhm.
And then when you ask sort of students about those essays, well, how would you, can you quote something from it? They can't. As in, only 10% of them can mention a sentence that actually does appear in that essay that they handed in. And again, sort of this is the disconnect between output and learning that we're seeing.
How do we train the next generation to use AI as a sparring partner rather than a ghostwriter?
Yeah, and I mean, this I think this is the part of the 21st century skill framework that emphasizes having ICT skills or well AI skills. So we make explicit learning goals about how to use AI as a sparring partner, and we train ourselves in that. If again our goal is learning, yeah.
Is the passive reception of AI information the greatest threat to critical thinking in 2026?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we should be wary of sort of assuming that we're just coming out of a golden age of critical thinking, and then AI showed up and it ruined everything. Yeah, I think sort of that over reliance on AI seems to be able to reduce your critical thinking within the area that you're using AI for. Yeah. But then again, what what were we coming from?
Mhm.
Was critical thinking perfect 200 years ago, 50 years
Mm.
ago?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think there's always been threats to. I think humanity has always struggled with critical thinking. I think we
Yeah,
continue to struggle with it, and I think this is one of the parts of the human condition that fascinates me as an educator. Yeah.
Plato warns that books would dull through understanding. Is AI just the modern version of that fear, or is this shift fundamentally different?
Yeah. But I mean, strictly speaking, I mean, it was Socrates who voiced that concern.
Mm.
But he did it in Plato's writing because Socrates, really was against writing, and he never wrote
Yeah,
anything himself.
no, no.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
so all the information, well, most of the information we had about Socrates is from Plato's writings about what Socrates said. Yeah. I think there's two other main sources that also seems to correlate a little bit with it, but they are
yeah.
describing Socrates as a much younger man, whereas Plato is describing as an old guy. But yeah, I mean, the argument from Socrates was that if you're just reading something, you're getting sort of this dumbed down understanding that is much less laden with information and allows you much less to interact with it than if you're speaking with a person. And I
Mhm.
think sort of this is a point that we would all agree on. I mean, right now, Mirella, we're doing a podcast, right? I mean, we're not writing a text, sending it off to your audience. So we're doing a live discussion so that we, in this dialogue, can explore nuances. We can ask little questions here and there. Um, so we believe, we agree with Socrates in that point that, the dialogue seems to be a more rich environment. I think that AI is again, also now a new technology. Um, and I think whether sort of, it will dull true understanding, that will depend a lot on how we define true understanding. If we
Mhm.
go back to Socrates, his argument was true understanding was your ability to engage and convince other people of your point.
Yeah.
Um, but so and if you agree with that definition of true understanding, well, then reading could potentially dull that, yeah, because it doesn't necessarily prepare you for how to engage in a debate. So I think sort of with AI, I think that is also something where a lot of people are saying it's harming education. Yeah, well, I mean,
Mhm.
depends on how we define education. on how we define learning. And I think sort of,
So how would you define education then? At this point, I'm gonna ask you.
yeah, that's putting me on the spot, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, if I would define learning as establishing your own process that you memorized. So for me, sort of memorization is fundamental to learning. We can't have competencies without having knowledge that it builds upon. Yeah. And expressing yourself is proven to be one of the best ways of memorizing stuff. I mean, that's why we ask students to do assignments. Yeah. Because, if they have to articulate the answers themselves, they have to, take some knowledge, put it through their heads, and make sentences that come out in the other sense. And sort of in that sense, I I would tend to sort of, agree with Socrates that, more rich presentation is something that's easy to learn from. But I also think that there's a cost benefit element here. I mean, if we have, a world-class expert within a topic, if we were able to send that world-class expert round to every single student in Europe and for him individually to explain his expertise to them, that will probably give a better learning
Mhm.
than if, the students were to read his book. But there's the cost of this, yeah.
Mm.
And I think I think books, codified information, AI generated information, I think it has a place. And I think it has a place because learning also needs to be cost effective, yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, how do educational institutions need to rewire, quote and rewire, their grading systems if the result no longer provides the learning?
Yeah. That is a great question.
Mm.
uh
Because I
so
know at this point, currently, we all, the students and the teachers and those institutions as well, are in still in this bubble of confusion. Let's call it confusion, if you allow me, from so many aspects because of AI. So yeah, but please tell us what you can.
yeah. One answer that I could give you is that education in most of Europe, and especially in Denmark, it's state owned, it's state financed, and it's state regulated. Yeah.
Hmm.
And that provides a great buffer
Hmm.
because we get our money no matter what the learning actually happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, so we're kind of, we're saved by the bell on that one.
Mm.
And strangely enough, sort of, even if in the places in the world where there are significant private players, the result sort of kind of seems to be the same. Again, sort of, I think we should remember that education is a package um, that combines something about certification with learning, with social coherence, with a social network, with sort of a co-branding with the institution. So it's a package deal of which learning is only one component. And so even if that component is at risk right now, well, the other parts of the package are still there. But I think when I listen to sort of, some of the steps that are being taken slowly within the Danish educational sector, and I think this is much the same across the rest of
Can you
Europe.
give us some example in
Yeah.
regards?
Well, I mean, when I look at sort of, what's happening in the educational sector right now, there seems to be an idea that we need to move away from writing as an
Okay.
assessment
Oh,
tool.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And potentially, I mean, AI might mean that writing as a specific skill might in the long run die.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. But there's speculation about that.
Okay.
But very basically because well, in the sense, Marilla, that um, if we have great AI transcription software,
Mm-hmm.
why would I ever need to write something down when I can just, tell a machine what it needs to write down for me. Yeah. So, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about AI is it's erasing the boundaries that traditionally were between written expression, oral expression, non-verbal expressions. It's sort of, allowing us to move more seamlessly between those. Yeah. But if we come back to the education, one of the things that I've done at the educations that I coordinate is there's no longer any purely written exams. There still are some institutions that have them, but they are fewer. Again, and I think this is because of the idea that the education sector moves very slowly. I also had a dean that sort of explained to me at one point that written exams, while they were probably unreliable, so were oral exams, and in general, sort of, students got matched the same grades, so what was the bother really?
Well, in regards, I'm curious. Right now, students are, because the majority of the students, they do still like really use AI for so many different reasons while they are studying, right? Just put it like in a short term. But so at what point, like the teachers or the schools, the entities, the faculties actually allows or can check if that essay or that assignment or whatever task it was written by the student, or to what degree they could know that, or you as a teacher you could know that.
Yeah,
I'm really curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a number of studies that point to the fact that it's now been some years since we were able to detect if something was written by an AI or written by a human.
How do you do that? How do you detect it? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, you ask an AI to to assess it. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, basically sort of.
So you still stay in the loop.
Well, I mean, basically, sort of, back before we sort of had, well, not the internet, but if we go 20, 30 years back, what we would see with plagiarization, as in students would copy, pieces of text from books that they've written and put it into their assignments. Typically, sort of, you'd spot that as a professor by noticing, that the text sort of seemed weird. I remember getting an assignment once from a student at CBS, where in his methodology chapter, he explained how he himself personally had discovered what the difference between inductive and deductive ways of developing knowledge was, which is would be great if he did that, but what book did you find that in, mate? And and you have quoted that, but sort of then we got into having IT tools for doing this, and we had this. It was called plagiarization software, and there was a number of software programs that went in, and you basically I just get a plagiarization score, saying 20% of this seems to be. Of course, that was sort of, an interesting tool because these tools were also accessible by students. So I'd get a lot of reports at exactly 20% because that was the cutoff rate at which my institution said we're not going to investigate it. So, basically somebody had written something and then, they throw it into the plagiarization machine, and they'd see,
so
okay,
just 1 second. What is because I didn't know this part. I'm sorry, I'm just curious. What is the maximum of the percentage that can be accepted?
Varies by institution. So the institution that I teach at had sort of a rule of thumb that over 20% we should investigate, under 20% we wouldn't even investigate. Again, this was driven a lot by sort of, a cost benefit assessment. But the thing is, and just sort of to finish the point here, is that nowadays with AI, I can't even run that test anymore. And I mean, the only things that we can really spot it with is if students, they forget to raise AI comments like, here is the list of 8 points, like, would you like me to invest? And we've had a couple of cases like that, where students have, I mean, it goes back to something, to this thing that my father told me once, that if you're dumb enough to cheat, you're so dumb you're going to get caught. But I mean, but I mean, because that's just, I mean, well, I mean, dumb is perhaps also the wrong word here, because it's an honest mistake. There was a case that was going around social media the other days where Matas, this big Danish company, on one of their product texts, they'd forgotten to, erase the AI commentary. But then again, Matas, they have, what, 3-4 million products on their homepage. Okay, they make a mistake once, and people were saying, this is a proof that Matas is out of control. They don't have processes. I would think they have, I would think that, it's just one guy who, was supposed to do a check and missed that one part there, rather than anything else. But I think we're going to see a lot more of stuff like that from sort of the grading system. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'd just like to interject in the final sort of to wrap that up, is that grading has always been something that's been, discussed. What should we grade on? How should we grade? So AI is coming into that, but there was already huge debates about how to do it, why to do it, should we move more to process? That's been the general trend over the last 50 years, that we need to move more onto process and less onto the finished work. One interesting sort of thing that I've seen is the Copenhagen Business School, where I used to teach as an external lecturer, not to be confused with the Business Academy of Copenhagen. They've added an assessment form called ongoing assessment, where basically a professor will assess you for your general appearance in the course.
Nice.
Which is the concept
But
that
I
they learned
agree upon this, to be honestly.
Well, I mean, they haven't. I mean, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying they changed all of their courses into that. I'm just saying they added that as an option, that if you have a course, you can do this sort of grading. What I'd be really interested in is how they're ever going to handle complaints. Because a student has a legal right to complain, yeah. So I mean, if I participate in your course and you say I get the grade 7, that's good, and I say, yeah, but why? Well, you weren't there that day. Yes, I was. You just didn't notice me. But then it becomes very much a he said thing. So looking forward to seeing the adventures there, how they end. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be interesting, that's for sure. I mean, things are changing. Change is it's good. I have been saying this so many times. But
change is the only constant, Mirella.
Exactly, I agree. I agree.
So, I mean, what would a machine never be able to replicate? I think I come back to the von Neumann theorem, where von Neumann, this mathematician guy who lived a long time ago, he said, if we can clearly define a problem, we can build a machine that can do that.
I agree. I agree.
The key word in his sentence is if. If we are able to define, a task, then I think a machine will be able to replicate it. And it comes back then to sort of, the debate right now about, the term artificial intelligence. Is AI intelligent? And one of the reasons that this is being debated is we don't really have a clear definition of what makes us humans intelligent. If we believe, Marilla, that our intelligence works in the way that sort of, based on your prior experiences in life, you will sort of weigh your different words and options, and out of them choose a sentence and say that, well, then artificial intelligence is intelligence. If we believe intelligence is a codification and calculation of past experiences to point a way forward, yeah. But if we define intelligence as something else, or if we define it as undefinable, then I think, we come into a point where it might be possible that a machine would never be able to replicate it. I mean, there's a Norwegian researcher called Inga Strømsky that I like to quote on AI. And she's made the point that she believes that the current sort of investments in large language models is a dead end in terms of achieving general artificial intelligence.
But I agree, it makes sense. It has a logic, to be honest.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is again. Sometimes people they deride ChatGPT as a stochastic parrot, because it repeats words without understanding a meaning, and then we can look back in the mirror at ourselves and ask, well, how many humans repeat words without understanding or reflecting on everything? So I think it's a difficult question to answer, because I fundamentally, I think Feynman was onto something. I think if we can define a problem, we can make a machine that can solve it. But can we put creativity, critical thinking on a formula? If we can, well, we will definitely have a machine that will be able to do that. But what if we can't? And I think sort of sometimes when I see people attempting to do that, the results are weird. Yeah. I was listening to a guy called Paul Bradshaw a couple of years back, where he teaches journalism, yeah, and he built an anti-bias machine where, as a journalist, you put your article into it, and then it would come up, and if you used a word like boat immigrant, it would say, oh, that's not the right word. We should say a person from who's fleeing war and climate change, and then he would say, my machine has reduced bias. I was like, Paul, come on, you simply took the bias in the article and replaced it with your own. I mean, a Chinese censor, he would love this system, yeah. And I think sort of, we should also be careful about what we're trying to automate here, yeah. Something, I mean, especially sort of that statement, let's try to automate bias away. That leads us into some interesting places. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is such a long and wonderful, interesting discussion about intelligence as such, because it's so broad, and it should be taken from so many aspects and angles. But one of the things that who uses metacognition is the sharpest and higher level of intelligence as such. And it's the ability to think upon your own thinking, right? So that means your ability to be aware of how you think and the process of your own thinking, in order for you to take different actions and to decide differently in that sense. So I just make it like really short. It's so wonderful. It's so powerful, and it's so simple to use. And to use it in your daily life as well, because you can do that actually. Just want to say and add something really wonderful in regards to what you were just talking, because I think it's really cool to also for students to use if they want to. It's connected to the critical thinking. That's why I'm saying this. So it can help a lot in many ways. You also talk about initiative and self-direction. How does a student stay self-directed when an algorithm is suggesting their next move?
Yeah. But by remembering a suggestion is not a direction, yeah. I mean, I think part of thinking about thinking, or I love the word metacognition, for me at least, is just sort of remembering what sort of to accept and what to push back on, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think sort of this is where I may also have a concern, because my students, they are age 21, and I think even when I look at them, are they ready? Are they ready for, metacognition? Are they ready for
I agree.
for being self-directed? Um, and I think, some of them are. I think it's very important to remember, that student body in Denmark, and I think that goes even more so for all other countries. They're not a homogenic group. They are different people with very, very different needs. And I think sort of this idea that AI pushes us into the driver's seat, you should also remember that's forcing us into it. And that means sort of we can't just say, oh, this ended up stupid, but that was because the professor said, a stupid professor, so stupid professor. If all of a sudden I'm being forced to make decisions all the time, there's a risk that this will stress some students out. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Um, and I mean, does this mean we need to sort of go at a slower pace or focus in a different way? That's one of the things that I myself, I'm thinking about these days.
How do we create a safe and secure environment for students to fail when AI makes it so easy to always be right?
Well, I mean, I think and that's one of the interesting points because some of the early experience with AI simulations, they suggest that students are really willing to fail forward in AI simulations. Yeah. Again, coming back to this point, AI has the potential to enhance our learning. It has the potential to inhibit our learning. And narrow AIs that simulate a specific learning situation seem to be a great place to have students fail. Because the students don't experience a social cost of failing in front of another human. It's just, a dumb machine.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely, a point here for AI to helping create, that space. And I think that question also, is a great reminder that AI has this dual nature in regards to learning.
What does augmented minds look like in a daily routine? How do you personally use AI without losing your own thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I well, very basically, I remember to put time in on my calendar for learning. Um,
Nice.
I mean, I mean, I'm a I'm a learning professional before I get loud. But it also means sort of that I have to be conscious about what do I want to do? How does my portfolio
I agree.
fit together? And sometimes then, I go into production mode. And when I go into production mode, you know, then I don't worry too much about learning, but I have to sort of, remember that's the conscious choice. Yeah.
I was just talking in my last episode with René Larsen about this. He's also a teacher at the VIA University in Herning. He thinks, of course, he's not sure, but he thinks that because of AI, reading a book might really decreasing, like physical book will decrease like a lot, and it might be that the case, but again, as you just said right now, through awareness, I decide that I'm gonna read books, physical books. So this is one of among other things that I do add in my personal process, as you just mentioned yours a second ago. Feel the smell, highlight a sentence or more, or even the whole book. It's an experience as such, like immersive experience. That's the whole point. It's not just digital. It's not just shallow or until a certain point, but it gives you something more, at least for me.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I mean, I think one of the things that I started doing in order to keep my learning sharp is writing books. So, that's the next stage, maybe. Um, no, again, coming back to sort of if I have to formulate sort of what will be what will be sort of a 300, 400 piece of text, I I have to think a lot about a topic, and that's sort of one of the ways where I challenge myself. It's a good example also, and I think the death of the physical book has been announced for a number of decades now. Yeah. And
Definitely.
and the strange thing is there's been sort of a dual thing happening. Yeah. There's been on one hand, there's been sort of access to information through electronic means, but on the other hand, modern technology also allows you much more easily than before to write books, to print books, to publish
True.
books. I mean, you want to have a great layout for your book. Well, an AI can do a reasonable job at that. Sorry to the people at Glendale, who work with that right now, who I have a great collaboration with. If you're watching this, I love you and I hope you stay. But but um, you know the the idea, my point here is that the process of publishing a book has never been easier, and it's never been cheaper. It used to be sort of the publishing a book, would set you back, 80, 100,000 crowns. And now I think, publishing a book, I mean, well, 3,000 crowns, that's, should get you started with a basic version. If you want something that looks really fancy, maybe double. So books have never been cheaper to produce and give out. And I see that a lot at conferences these days, where any consultancy company, they'll stand there and they'll have their little, leather-bound book, this is my book on how to make e-commerce subscriptions. And, most of what's in those books, I mean, sometimes they're good. The subscription book by Morten Hansen that I just read, we have that, we use that as part of our curriculum. So we think that one is great. But other times, it's been very clear that sort of, the book is meant to be given, it's not meant to be read. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
It's the one page that's important is the front page. Yeah.
I get the perception that apparently nowadays this became like gaining out more authority as such, and this is kind of the must step to do or to have whatever to gain that piece of authority. And I'm not saying it's wrong or good or whatever, because I'm not here to criticize nobody. I'm not interested in that. I have other things to focus on, not on that. But what
you're rewiring to rise. Yeah, I get it.
Exactly. But what I'm trying to say is simply that it's a tiny bit shallow for me as how I am and who I am and how I live my personal life and professional life as well. For me, if something doesn't have depth, it doesn't have my attention. The authority as a professional, you can build that authority in so many ways. Yes, indeed, it takes so much more time to have the result as such. Maybe to say maybe why people, professionals also might go towards so much towards this path on, as you just said, writing a book.
I think that this comes back to sort of one of the other points that we crossed on before, that AI is lowering the barriers between different mediums of communication.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Socrates, if he was alive today and he still believed sort of writing is shit, well, he could do a podcast. He could do a motivational speech. He could have a camera record him. He could have an AI put that into writing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, even if he didn't care about writing, but if people wanted, a written product from him, he could take one of his speeches and relatively easy have that transmuted into a written product. So I think we're going to, again, AI, I think, is going to lower the barriers, is going to allow us to access as humanity some minds that we couldn't access before. I mean, with Socrates, we were bloody lucky, because what if Plato hadn't existed? Yeah, then we would never know about him. As we'd never know about his philosophical teachings. But because Plato was there and wrote stuff down that Socrates allegedly said, then we have his thinkings, and we can consider him a foundational piece of Western philosophical thought. But if Plato hadn't been there, I think this must have happened throughout history. There must have been great thinkers, who were great orators, in their time, and everybody looked up and said, that guy is really sharp. If only more people, had listened to him or her. Yeah. But now we're going to get them. And I think that's the good news. So in terms of sort of, books, and I mean, I don't distinguish that much between physical and ebooks. But in terms of sort of codifying the knowledge, capturing it, I think that's going to happen to a much higher degree than it ever has before.
So if you could change one thing about how we introduce AI to the next generation, what would it be?
Well, I mean, my learning is right now in sort of in these years, we simply need to introduce it, yeah. And we need to teach people about what is this tool, what does it do, and I often like when I introduce it to start out simply by explaining to my students how the system works. Because if they listen and they think about what I'm saying, then they'll arrive to the conclusion that I just presented to you. And if you want people to really believe in something, you need to sort of, give them two pieces of Lego, and have them put it together themselves. Yeah, I think that the majority answer to well, the first answer to your question is basically sort of we just need to recognize that right now, students, workers in Denmark, they don't. There's a lot of gaps in your knowledge about AI, and it needs to be explained. It needs to be explored, and it's difficult because it's a moving target, but it needs to be done. The second part of your question is you used the phrase, how to introduce it to the next generation. Yeah. What is the next generation? I mean,
Yeah, true.
when I teach, I do so to young adults, between the age of 18 and 30. Yeah. And I found, sort of that if I, tell them how to use AI, they become more proficient at that. They become proficient at learning with AI. And generally, I'm seeing fairly good results. There's also growing evidence that when somebody tries to do what I'm doing with kids, in primary school settings, so age 6 to 15, it fails horribly. So there's a study by a guy called Christian Dalsgaard at the University of Aarhus, who did sort of some experience with children in the middle school, so fourth to sixth grade, and he basically found they were not able to challenge the AI. They were not able to distinguish between a suggestion and a direction. It was always taking a direction. And again, strangely enough, this is really similar to how kids in that age respond to adults, to human teachers. If in your primary school you have a teacher who tells you something that's, you and I as adults would look at and say, that's wrong, kids won't pick up on it. They won't.
Yeah.
They won't be able to challenge it. They won't be able to push back. They won't be able to sort of understand the nuance. And AI here is similar. So I mean, there's also here, I think, a very interesting question about when do we start introducing broad AI systems to kids? Because getting the learning enhancement effects from the broad models seems to be quite difficult.
What is the one digital mindset shift that will determine who thrives and who merely survives in the next 5 years?
Yeah, and I think sort of deliberate use. As I like to say, sort of if we think about AI is putting us in the driver's seat, it's something about recognizing, where do I want to go? What direction do I want to set for myself? What level of expertise do I want to achieve in certain areas? And that sort of, is a daunting proposition to put to people. Whoa, I mean, how should I know would be the logical answer back. Yeah. But you need sort of to have some processes to figure that out. And I think sort of the winners, that will be the people who use AI deliberately, and have awareness of how it works. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Hallelujah.
as a lead-in at a sales pitch for your Sunday show, right?
Exactly. Well, at the end of the day, if AI can do the work, what is left for the human being to be?
That's a great philosophical question. I mean, because what does it mean to be, to start with? What did it mean before AI? So I mean,
Well, we're
I
talking about now.
yeah. And but I think sort of the answer is much the same as before. I need what it means to be, is one of the great questions. I mean, essentially we're coming back to the meaning of life. Yeah, some of the things that research has pointed to is something like, if you believe that happiness is a goal, yeah, well, then having meaningful relations seems to be the key to happiness. Yeah. But then again, you can argue the point of life is something else than individual happiness. Yeah, that's a
true.
classical. That's a classical Western approach. Yeah, I think we should all be happy. Yeah, because it also leads us down some interesting places. I mean, the one key life event that can make you more unhappy, much more unhappy than anything else in life, that's having a kid. Statistically speaking. I love my kids, but I mean, I hope everyone does love their kids. But statistically, people just become unhappy when they get kids. The strange thing is the single thing that if we look into happy abuse,
kids.
yeah, yeah. Well, so the way you do it, so that's why you're laughing. But but Mirella, just to finish it off, then happiness research points to the single life event that will make you the most happy. That's having grandkids.
Oh, okay.
But you see, you can't really get to one without the other. So, if we prioritize again, I was coming off from your question of, what's left for a human to be. And I mean, if we say the point is happy, that leads us some interesting places. But I think sort of, I mean, we've been pushed into this. We cannot undo technological process.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it simply you need to realize that you need to make some decisions about sort of
doing something because anyway it will be here.
And I mean, but I think also this is different for different professions. I mean, a gardener would look at this in one way. A knowledge worker like me, an educator, I think in many ways much more rapidly and more directly exposed than somebody working with a more manual piece of labor. Right now, that may change. Yeah. But I think sort of, the basic question that sort of, this poses to a gardener or to a professor is the same. Sort of, you have to sort of decide what you want, and try to go for that. And I mean, I'm a little bit sort of unsure about the American self-help coaches, the Tony Robbins of this world, who say, just set a clear goal. Is it really? I agree with you. I have to be honest, honestly. Yeah. No, because I mean, for me, it's more the dialogue about the goal. Yeah. That's the important part, rather than sort of the actual goal that you come up with. It's the process. Exactly. Totally agree with you. Makes so much sense. Definitely. And I mean, I think, there's also something about not being afraid of it. I was going on a walk with my youngest son the other day, and we saw a kid who was even younger. He was maybe 4 years old, and he was on one of these running bikes, 2 wheels, but no pedals, right? So he's using his legs, And this little kid, he was running really fast, and you could see the joy in his face. Yeah. You could see how happy he was. You could see he was like, "Oh, I'm going faster than I've ever gone before. Wow, this is great." But I mean, that's us humans and technology for you right there in a nutshell. I mean, we are, as humans, we are effectively cyborgs in the sense that we are able to take a lot of different technologies and seamlessly integrate it into our process. If you take a pen and paper, you start writing down process, you're integrating the pen and the paper into your thinking process. And we've been doing that for millennia. And I think, if we come back to sort of that question of why does humans end up becoming the dominant species on this planet? Well, probably because of our ability to that. And AI is the logical next step in that evolution, where we integrate it into ourselves. But as I think your question carries the point of, it's important to do so, with care, and to not forget who we are. Yeah, definitely. I absolutely agree. One last question, promise. This section, I call it a note to your past self ritual. If you
could go back and say something really strong and important to your younger version of yourself, what will it be?
The first thing that came back to my mind is I would like to go 5 years back and find my younger self and say, listen, that hunch you had about getting into AI, do it. So I mean, it's an easy choice, right? But that was the first thing that came to mind. I think it's been a fantastic, interesting subject to get into. I think it's one where there's a lot of attention right now, and I think I can safely say that it's one where there actually should be even more.
For so many
And
reasons, I agree with you here.
well, I mean, we just had an election to the Danish Parliament, yeah, and AI was missing. It was not a topic. I mean, the different politicians they were pretending it didn't exist, basically.
Seriously, I didn't
Yeah,
know that
seriously.
part. Okay.
I mean, you had debates about should we have a new tax to tax the rich even more? Should we have do something about pesticides? That was some of the big topics. But
Not the AI though.
the one guy who mentioned it was one on a fringe right party, and I mean, which just seems weird. And I think sort of Denmark has traditionally prided itself of being, the uber
Yeah,
digitalists of Europe.
exactly.
I
Through
mean,
digitalization.
saw an overview once of the different European countries about how they were using digitalization within the legal system. And
Yeah.
there was one European country that whenever people they'd been sentenced, and they were supposed to serve time in prison, they sent out an email, or well, the Danish e-box system,
Yeah.
summoning people saying, you need to show up at this prison. There was one country who did it electronically. One. You can guess which one, right? And there
Yeah.
was also and you can also guess which country had the biggest problem of people not showing up to serve time in prison when they were summoned in country. Yeah. And I think sort of, we've been digitalizing a lot of places in Denmark
Yeah.
without sort of stuffing
Yeah.
up and reflecting.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. But an interesting thing is with AI, it seems we're not going fast.
Yeah, I noticed. I had this perception. Probably, I'm just supposing here, of course, because I don't have the data, so I literally don't have the research as such. But just supposing that because Denmark always have been so digitalized as such as a country, and as you just said, like literally 2 seconds ago, everything was so digitalized. Like literally, 95% of my phone are apps while I'm living in Denmark. I just think probably it's kind of people that still have this feeling, perception slash mindset probably that is, oh, it's just something that we do regularly or usually in that sense. And probably they still stay in that perception. But again, we return to our main focus. AI is going so damn fast. And if you don't upgrade the systems, then you risk to kind of stay behind of the wheel. Yes, we have get to the end of it. Thank you so very much for your time and willingness to share with us so many important informations regarding AI education, students. Thank you so very much. It means a lot to me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. What a profound conversation with Just Kjærgård. If there is one thing to take away from today, is that while AI can skip the doing, we must never let it skip the thinking. As we move forward into this automated age, let's remember that our greatest asset isn't the speed of our prompts, but the depth of our critical inquiry. If you want to reach out to Just, you can find him on LinkedIn, Just Kjærgård Pedersen. Please support Rewire to Rise by subscribing to the channel. It will mean a lot to me. Until next time, stay sharp.